let's talk about the other biggest design story in technology, which is Spotify and the general TikTokification of everything. David, you wrote up the design. There was an event this week. Alex Heath was there. We're going to have some more coverage. We got an interview with their head of design on Decoder coming out next week. But tell us what's going on with Spotify.
Yeah, so this was Spotify's Stream On event, which it does occasionally. The last one I think was 2 years ago. It's their big kind of State of the Union, here's what's going on at Spotify thing. And mostly they talk to creators. It was like 90 minutes of them being like, are you a creator? We love you. All creators, we love you. We are Spotify. Come to Spotify. We love you. Creators, hello. They brought out the Jonas Brothers just to introduce a video, which was the coolest flex I've ever seen in my entire life. They just came out and they were like, look, Jennifer Lopez also likes Spotify. And then they left. It was amazing. But anyway, the big announcement was that they're redesigning the Spotify homepage. And anyone who has used Spotify knows that basically Spotify is just like a lot of album covers. That's the only sort of design in there. It's just rows and rows of tiles of album covers. And now it looks a lot more like some mix of like Instagram stories and TikTok and like a little bit of YouTube. But the idea is basically if you go to like the podcasts thing, instead of getting a bunch of album covers of podcasts, you're going to get actual like feeds of auto playing podcasts. They're big into video as a thing. They're big into big imagery now. The idea is to be much more sort of immersive and also like discoverable instead of just fighting to have better album covers. It's going to actually start to try to play you the most interesting bit of a podcast or a song or an audiobook and actually connect to you that way. So that's the sort of TikTokification of it all. Everything is much more full screen. It's auto playing. It's much louder. It's much more visual. And as far as I can tell, Spotify users hate this in the same way that they've hated every other non-music listening thing that Spotify has done, which is now the impossible track that Spotify is on, where Spotify is like, okay, as we've talked about many times in the show, it turns out being a streaming music company is an awful, 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 awful business.
Not great.
Don't do it if you ever want to make any money. So Spotify is now this big company that like can't stop losing money on music and is trying desperately to find other ways to make money. They've made this big bet on podcasts. They bought an audiobook company. They're trying to make live audio happen. And then you have Spotify users who just keep raising their hand being like, I just would like to listen to my music, please. Can you leave me alone? And this is Spotify trying to sort of satisfy everybody. And at least based on the reaction to what we've seen, the app is not out yet for most people, but people do not like the idea of what Spotify is going for here, as far as I can tell.
I'm very sympathetic to the notion that people hate redesigns. I've lived through it myself.
Yes, absolutely.
That's fine. But I will say that we Reddit did a mild redesign this week too. We had the chief product person from Reddit on Decoder. They're splitting that into a text feed and a video feed, and all the feedback is get this video feed out of my face.
Yep.
Like we don't want it, even though all of the numbers inside of Reddit are, oh boy, people are spending a lot of time on video. People hate the video player. If we're going to do video, we should just put it over there and make a video feed and a text feed. And even then, people are like, get this video out of my face.
Right.
So I think there's like a revealed preference that's when you're alone, in your private time, you're watching the videos. And when someone asks you about it, you're like, I never watch videos. I only read novels. And I think every one of these companies is like dealing with that.
But the challenge there is the metrics don't track reality, right? Because it's like if I'm on Spotify is a perfectly good example, right? If I open up Spotify, press play on a playlist, turn my phone off, put it in my pocket and never touch it again, in a certain sense, that's a huge victory, right? Like that is the intended use of Spotify. I can listen to music all day without needing to interact with the app. Like from a user experience, that's a gigantic win. For Spotify trying to like make money and sell lots of really great, powerful visual ads, that's a disaster. And so what this is now is Spotify saying, and they even said this during the Stream On event, they're like, we're not worried about engagement metrics. We're not here to just try to keep you inside of our app as much as you can, while very clearly building things that autoplay with sound, and that are designed to be endlessly scrolling so that you look at them for much longer. It's like at some point you can't have it both ways. And they're going to be like, oh, well, engagement went way up. And it's like, well, of course it did. But are we sure that's good? Like, is that what we want out of Spotify?
Yeah. So one thing that the music industry in particular is fighting against straight up is TikTok. TikTok is where every song breaks. It's where I don't know, like Fleetwood Mac rises like a zombie to continue haunting me for the rest of my days. Just shut up.
Uh-huh.
It's so tiresome.
Rude.
Sorry. I understand the music is beautifully made, and I understand they were all dating each other, and it is on a technical level some of the finest music ever made. It is so boring. I'm sorry. I can't. I've been ranting about Fleetwood Mac since I was 16 years old. This is like the sanded off edges of me talking about Fleetwood Mac. But like, that's a thing that happened, right? The guy riding the longboard in California, getting the free cranberries for life or whatever, is entirely a TikTok phenomenon. I realize that if you don't know what I'm talking about, that sounded completely bonkers. But if you just put those words into Google, you will understand. It's a whole thing that happened.
Yep.
That's TikTok. Like TikTok just like made that song relevant again. It made Fleetwood Mac relevant again. It's doing it over and over and over again. It's where new artists break. It's changing the complexion of the music industry. It's making songs shorter, which is very funny. It's like sampling it. Like everything is in the music industry is happening on TikTok. And then underneath it all, TikTok is not a music service really. And so they're kind of like, yeah, music industry, you want to break a song? Just pay us a bunch of money and we'll make sure those tracks get promoted in a way that if Spotify does it and people claim Spotify does it, but if they actually do that, everyone will get really mad at Spotify.
Yeah.
So like Spotify's just got like a major problem on its hands that all discovery happens on TikTok. And then people go to Spotify to listen to the song. But they're spending all of their time on a platform that has video advertising built into it, which is much more lucrative than Spotify free.
Right. But the important second piece of that, though, is like it's not audio-led discovery, right? Like people are watching videos through which they discover audio. And that's like Spotify has everybody, lots of different publications, or not publications, lots of different companies have tried to figure out how to do audio first discovery. And it turns out it's essentially impossible because the idea of like, I'm going to sit here and just listen to something I've never heard of for a while is super boring and people get tired of it. And that's why everybody puts the hook to their song at the beginning of the song now. And so, but what you have with video is it's just more interesting. It's just going to hold your attention a little longer, which gives the song a chance to catch you a little longer. And then you can sort of trip through TikTok that way. And so Spotify has been trying to play this, like, how do we do more visual things game forever to keep you looking at the app, and has just never solved it anything like the way TikTok has solved it.
Yeah. And now they've just made TikTok again. And I think that the big question is whether people are going to open Spotify first to be like, I want to find some new things. This is Spotify's claim, right? That the business they're in is actually discovery and not playback. And if you listen to the interview with Gustav that Alex is going to do on Decoder next week, or if you listen to their event, they're very clear that the whole thing they're doing is trying to get people to try new things.
Yeah.
And that is fundamentally Spotify's value to the world, is discovery across the list. I'll just read this quote, not to give away the whole interview, but he says, in regards to cover art, he said to Alex, you have to click through one of the titles and you have to wait for 1.5 minutes on average to get to the hook. That can't be the best way to discover music. The best way to discover audio must be through audio, which makes intuitive sense. But I know that when people open Spotify and it just starts blasting them with hooks, they're going to lose their minds.
Yeah, I think that's right. And I think, by the way, the discovery thing is something you'll hear from every single music platform. They all think that the main thing that they can do for the music industry and for listeners is expose you to new stuff, right? Because it's like, if I want to listen to Rumors by Fleetwood Mac, I have infinity options, many of them free, one of them type it into YouTube.
And the last one being don't.
Rude. Rumors is wonderful. A perfect album.
Look, I'm not even disputing the argument. I know that many people feel this way.
Neela hates Fleetwood Mac.
When I spent a bunch of time with Leor Cohen, who runs YouTube Music, a while back, and he said very much the same things. And like Apple will say the same thing. That's why they gave Zane Lowe all that money, right? It's like discovery is the thing. They want to help break artists so they can be friends with the music industry. They want to help break artists so that listeners will keep coming back to discover new things. Like that is the product in a really real way. It's just that TikTok showed up and is so much better at it than anybody else.
Underneath that is the real problem for Spotify, is that you listening to hits from the 90s over and over again does not actually make those artists any money. The game that they're all playing is like pennies forever, right? So Spotify has a lot of incentive to make their catalog artists, or like the catalog artists from major labels, happy, because no one is getting the big dollars up front. They're all just getting pennies over time. But they still have to break new artists. And to break new artists, you got to shove them in people's faces all the time. You got to break new songs. And I think all of this stuff is in a real tension with the other piece of what they announced, which is an emphasis on video podcasts and showing you little clips of video podcasts in the feed as you scroll. Because that is just a jarring transition from like, here's the hook of a song. Do you like this playlist? Go over here. Here's 3 people talking about whatever, which is admittedly what we do here.
Hi, guys.
And we'll probably figure out how to get involved in that on Spotify. But it's just, there's a lot of stuff. There's a lot of business models they're trying to cram into one experience.
But this is the magic of TikTok. Like that thing you just described is the thing that has made TikTok so powerful, which is that it can be wrong about what you're going to be interested in 9 out of 10 times. And everyone is copying that for exactly that same reason, right? Like that's what Facebook is trying to do. They're like, are you interested in this? And you say no. And they're like, what about this? And you say no. And they're like, what about this? And they'll just do that forever.
And if Facebook can't figure it out, it's like, is it girls? And they will, there's just like one bikini girl, no matter what, at all times.
But that's the thing. And that's why you do that extra visual thing, because it's just constant. There's just so much going on in a way that, like, if you show me 8 seconds of silence at the beginning of a song on a playlist or like a slow building guitar, people are out. But if you just like play loud noise over and over again as I scroll, like that's going to keep me engaged.
So there is a lot of garbage, but then like things will hit that no one ever thought of.
Right.
And that's like the magic. Spotify does have Anchor. They're like user generated podcast tool, but they've really diminished its stature. I think they've even renamed it.
Yeah. It's part of Spotify for podcasters now.
Can I read you this quote that I've just been thinking about? So Spotify's really into video podcasts. Everyone's into video podcasts. The reason is not complicated, right? It's that for the platforms, not for necessarily for the podcasters, but for the platforms, being able to insert video advertising is more lucrative than audio advertising. There's a real dynamic between the money you make in audio and the money you make in video, and the dollars in video are generally higher. They're not higher on YouTube, which is weird, but YouTube is like the gold standard video platform. So that a lot of the platforms want to go capture those video dollars. So that's why Reddit does it. That's why Spotify's doing it. But here's this quote. And it just, video podcasting is one of the fastest growing areas of podcasting, and we expect that growth to continue. That's from Julie McNamara, head of global podcast studios at Spotify at this event. What's a video podcast? Is it just videos of people talking? This is a video podcast, right?
Yes.
I think we get that. Is The View a video podcast?
Yes.
Okay.
100%
what isn't
yes.
a video podcast?
I think Alex is right. Like, I think this stuff has all just sort of collapsed where it's like, okay, people talking is interesting. Watching people talk is interesting. These things don't all have to be different. We can just shove them together and just let them be shows. Like the word podcast is like a relic of iPods, right? Like it hasn't described what this industry is in a really long time.
No, I'm telling you, this is you are describing very confidently an existential crisis for the podcast industry.
Oh, absolutely. It's happening. It's like we're here.
I just think Spotify in particular thinks it's competing with TikTok and it's
competing with YouTube.
competing with YouTube.
Yeah.
And YouTube is out there. Like YouTube was at Hot Pod Summit, our podcasting conference a couple weeks ago. They announced YouTube podcast features. They announced video podcast features, background play. Like YouTube knows, they see it coming. They see that opportunity. But Spotify, I think, they're headed in a different way. And somewhere lost in all of this is, boy, I'd like to just see a bunch of songs in my catalog and pick from them, which appears to be fully out of favor at this point.
It's done.
Yeah, no one will ever own any music ever again.